Airbnb haunted, or am I being watched? I travel most months out of the year, and I just landed last night in Lima, Peru for an extended stay. I got a pretty fancy Airbnb in a nice location on the ocean. It had really great reviews, and I've already paid $750 for this month to stay here. It is an apartment with a main room with 2 tables in it on opposite sides of the room, a bedroom with a locking door, and a bathroom which you can only access through the bedroom. It also has a balcony with a sliding door that leads into the main room that can be locked. I arrived last night, and some weird things have started to happen since I got here. When I came in the apartment after my run this morning, I locked the door and I set the keys on the counter. I 100% remember doing this. I then left my shoes in the main room and smoked a cigar in my kitchen. I lit my cigar with my personalized lighter that I carry with me everywhere. I then went and took a 20-minute shower. Then weird thing number 1 happened. When I came back to the main room from my shower, I went to get my lighter and it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, but I was really confused because I know I left it on table 1. After looking everywhere, I finally found it on the other side of the room on table number 2, which I haven't even sat down at since coming to this apartment. I thought it was super weird, but I tried not to freak myself out over it. Then weird thing number 2 happened. I then went to get my keys so that I could go get some food. I go to the kitchen counter, and they are gone. This, in conjunction with the moved lighter, starts to freak me out, so I look literally everywhere. I turned the entire apartment upside down. I looked in the refrigerator. I took apart the bed. I went through every pair of clothing I had, and I even looked under the trash bag in the trash can. I looked everywhere, and nothing. I couldn't find them. Weird thing number 3. I started to get a bit paranoid, but I'm still hungry, so I go to put my shoes on so I can get food, and there is a razor blade in one of my shoes. I do not just own straight up razor blades. There are no razor blades that I know of in this apartment. Where the F did this razor blade come from? So now I start to freak out, and I call my friend and go on my balcony and talk to him for like 15 minutes and explain what's going on. He tells me to start looking through my apartment for cameras, etc. I start pulling the place apart, looking at all the wall decorations, etc. I'm doing this for about 10 minutes before I get to the kitchen and my fucking keys are back on the counter. What is going on? My friend thinks someone might be somehow watching me either by a camera or double-sided glass or something and is trying to mess with me or threaten me. I also am worried about that or wondering if my apartment is somehow haunted. How do I figure out what's going on? I feel unsafe, but at the same time, I paid $750 for this apartment and I doubt I will get it back if I leave now. How do I figure out if someone is watching me or breaking into my apartment? Any advice is appreciated. Thank you. And edit. For those asking if I'm high, I don't do drugs, so that's unlikely. As for the carbon monoxide theory, I sent a photo of the razor to my friend, and they can definitely see it, so I don't think it's a hallucination. Edit 2. I'm in the process of contacting Airbnb to try and get my money back and in somewhere new. It's issues, and there's a lot. Very sketchy. And the OP then gives us an update saying, I spent the night at a different hotel and I'm currently trying to get my money back and find a new Airbnb. Thank you guys so much for all of your advice and concern. The McMartin Preschool Trial. August 1983, Manhattan Beach, California. A small, simple building with a rudimentary playground, intimate classrooms, and a little sign hung up at the entrance painted in old Western lettering, which read, McMartin Preschool. It was founded by Virginia McMartin, and together with her daughter, Peggy, and grandson, Ray Bucky, They ran the daycare without incident for 28 years. Nothing exciting had ever happened. Until 1983, when one accusation turned the school's reputation on its head. According to a woman named Judy Johnson, whose son attended daycare at McMartin, he had begun to experience painful bowel movements, and she believed her son was being harmed at school by his teacher, Ray Bucky. But the fear didn't come out of nowhere. You see, this was in the heat of the satanic panic, a worldwide phenomena where people believed that Satanists were endangering their communities. And Judy Johnson believed her son was exploited by Ray Bucky for his own sick satanic pleasures. She would make several more accusations, including daycare workers having inappropriate contact with animals, and claiming that Ray flew in the air, which of course is insane, but the public didn't seem to think so, and neither did the police. The investigation began immediately. Ray Buckley was interviewed and questioned for hours, but at the end of the day, there was no proof, no medical records, no history of abuse. The only adult witnesses would have been his family, who surely would lie on his behalf, so the only witnesses left were the children. On September 8, 1983, just one day after Ray Bucky's arrest, the Manhattan Beach Police Department sent out a bulletin to over 200 parents of students, former and current, that read, "Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation. Ray Bucky, an employee of Virginia McMartin's preschool, was arrested September 7, 1983 by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children, as well as the rights of the accused, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We are asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include," and I have to change this because it was pretty graphic, but basically touching the students in their no-no square under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Pretty disturbing stuff. Also, photos may have been taken of your student in their no-no area as well. Any information from your child regarding having ever observed Ray Bucky to leave a classroom alone with a child during any nap period, or if they have ever observed Ray Bucky tying someone up, is important. Please complete the enclosed information form and return it to this department in the enclosed stamped return envelope as soon as possible. We will contact you if circumstances dictate same. We ask you to please keep this investigation strictly confidential because of the nature of the charges and the highly emotional effect it could have on your community. Please do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside your immediate family. Do not contact or discuss the investigation with Raymond Bucky, any member of the accused defendant's family, or employees connected with the McMartin preschool. There is no evidence to indicate that the management of Virginia McMartin's preschool had any knowledge of this situation, and no detrimental information concerning the operation of the school has been discovered during this investigation. Also, no other employee in the school is under investigation for any criminal act. That little annotation at the end is completely correct. There was no evidence, no indication that any crime had been committed from either Ray or the faculty. It was a he said, she said case from the start. But the actions of the police department make it abundantly clear. They weren't looking to exonerate him. They weren't even looking to investigate him. In their minds, he was already guilty. The organization that hosted the interviews that interviewed the kids was called Children's Institute International, an LA-based abuse therapy clinic run by American social worker Key McFarlane. And what they did was an affront to medical science. In the hunt for the supposed crime, they created the crime. In the heat of the satanic panic, normal, everyday people were more susceptible to fear. They believed something was happening, and they needed proof, no matter the cost. The people interviewing the kids ended up asking them suggestive questions, or leading questions. These are questions that not only justify the interviewer's own bias, but these kind of statements skew the perspective of the interviewee. For instance, instead of asking, "What happened at school?" they'd ask, "He violated you, didn't he?" Not much room for interpretation. Not much room for alternative facts or new perspectives. That's a yes or no. And if someone said no, they'd reword that same question over and over in 100 different ways until the answer was yes. And once they got that yes, it was a wrap.
Raymond Bucky, his sister Peggy Ann,
Hi.
their mother Peggy McMartin Bucky, grandmother Virginia McMartin, and 3 teachers were all charged with raising 18 children at the McMartin Preschool.
By the end of the interviews, 360 children were apparent witnesses to the crimes of Ray Bucky. And according to them, he did more than kill a horse. The children had also seen witches flying in the air. They'd traveled by hot air balloon on occasion, were taken deep underground through a network of tunnels beneath the school, taken to parties at airports and car washes, and one even claimed to have entered a secret room by being flushed down a toilet. And I am seriously not making any of this up. This was the bulk of the accusations. That is, of course, excluding the physical aspects of the crimes. 360 children, 360 testimonies, physical injury, exploitation, warped supernatural stories. Most of those interviewed were photographed without their clothes, not by doctors, but by a quote-unquote medical examiner who identified tiny scars or pieces of skin that supposedly indicated systemic abuse. And all of these interviews were taped. Every single one. Days worth of footage. Lie after lie. They recorded each child, hypnotized into lying about a single man, interrogated for hours on end, regurgitating the ludicrous, imaginary scenes, fed to them by a scared community of unqualified, irresponsible idiots. And during this period, Ray Bucky was still in jail, where he would remain for another 5 years while the lies piled up. Day after day, more evidence would come forward. Another child, another story, another evidence of his monstrosity, and he would have to wait longer, rotting in a cell while the investigators hammered in nails. And there's more. During the pretrial, Judy Johnson, who made the original accusation, was hospitalized for acute paranoid schizophrenia. All of the testimony she made, all of the accusations that started this snowball of chaos, fear, and consequences were made by a mentally ill woman. And to me, that's incredibly sad. Not only was Ray Bucky falsely imprisoned because of these claims, but if officials cared enough to question her a little more, they would have realized she was ill. And she might have gotten help, but she didn't. And in 1986, before the preliminary hearing concluded, Judy Johnson died of chronic alcoholism. The preliminary hearing lasted 20 months, and in the end, Ray Bucky was acquitted on all charges.
Stand trial.
As to counts 3,
On January 18,
count
1990,
8, count 9, count 12,
after 124 witnesses,
count 14,
1,000 pieces of evidence,
count 56, count 57,
and $15 million of taxpayers' money,
59,
the longest and most expensive criminal trial in U.S. history came to an end.
we the jury in the above entitled action find the very defendant not guilty.
The case lasted 7 years and cost 15 million taxpayer dollars. But we aren't here to talk about how ridiculous this case is. You can see that for yourself. No, we're here to talk about the tapes. And although the tapes no longer exist, I found a transcript from the McCarthy trial and a Dr. Michael Maloney testifying on his experience watching 40 of the tapes. Here are a couple of quotes from the transcript, edited for decency. In almost all cases, the interview started with drawing a picture that was typically outlined by the interviewer. After that, there was a procedure where they went into naming body parts, the specific focus being on the private parts. There was then an introduction of so-called anatomically correct dolls, with the focus again on the private parts of the dolls. There was an introduction of pictures of students and teachers from the school, where persons were identified by the examiner and by the child, with specific focus on certain teachers in the school, and sometimes the child himself. There was an introduction of puppets as a method of presenting information. There was an introduction of the nature of these dolls, that they were dolls that you could not find in a store. There was an introduction of variously referred to yucky, sneaky, and tricky games. There was an introduction of Ray Bucky being a bad person, surveilled by police. There was an introduction of bodily functions in terms of Ray Bucky, and what that might look like, and so forth. Those items were in almost every case here and in many others as well. The defense asked the doctor about reinforcement. How was it done? And the doctor says this: if a child were to have identified a private part of the drawing, the dolls were then introduced, and the interviewer say, "What was this part again?" If they answered correctly, the reply would be, "Great, you're smart. You're really a smart kid." That's the reinforcement, as well as this. There is an implication, if not a statement, that there is something wrong. At this point, from the children, we don't know if there's anything wrong or not, but saying, "These dolls help us figure out some of these things," presents the idea that there is something that needs to be figured out. So that's a strange setting behavior as well. There's ground laid out, we're going to have to work on something here. In some of the tapes, there's something much more specific, saying that negative things happened. There are words like yucky used very frequently in these statements. We're using the dolls as an intermediary. The dolls will help us figure it out. This is where you could really get into the risk of a fantasy problem. You are removing responsibility from the child. You're not saying to that child, "I want you to tell me what you know." You're saying, "We can use the dolls. They'll help us." The McCarthy preschool trial is one of the most horrifying American witch hunts in our modern day. The fear of Satanism put an innocent man in jail for 5 years, with no recourse for the lies told against him. In my opinion, everyone was a victim in this case. Not just Ray Bucky, but 360 innocent children, subject to intense interrogation, and whose very minds were warped and molded into engines of fantasy. What should they think as they grow up? What's real? What isn't? The feelings of guilt, shame, and confusion must have been so immense for these students. And although the tapes have been destroyed, we can only imagine what kind of damage they dealt on their unwitting participants. Home alone with my old dog. Although it doesn't seem like it, this happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago. I was in the later years of high school and was home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At that time, my family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-collar neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything, I was a big dude who had friends and went on dates, but I'm a natural introvert, so I cherished the rare alone time that I got. This weekend, I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine. Play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, then order a late takeout dinner, pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching some Dragon Ball Z. Then around 2 a.m., fall asleep on the couch with my old dog Cecil. Cecil was a beagle who was as old as the hills and had been in our family about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful, and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. Anyway, back to the story. It's approximately 1 a.m. I just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I hear a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Anyone who has lived in a city knows noises happen at all moments of the night. Cecil's head popped up out of my lap and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later, I hear another bang, and Cecil did something I never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through the dog's barking, I could now make a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted and was hard to open even with a key, and it made a lot of noise. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. Quick little bit of context for anyone who hasn't lived in a bad neighborhood. If someone tries to get into your house and moves on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house despite the door being locked, well, they want you. Knowing this, I rush upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I keep under my bed for situations like this. Then I head down to my basement. I probably should have ran, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and plus I had nowhere to go. While I'm heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil blows past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice say, "Oh fuck," and the banging stopped. I didn't call the cops or anything else, which was probably the dumbest thing I'd ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with a bat in my hand. My brother came home that morning and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to take a look, and when we gave it a tug to open it, the whole door fell off. The psycho was one good shove away from getting in my house, but old Cecil scared him off. I'm pretty sure that lazy, fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismissed his actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But when I tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, you can take that to the bank. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew that door was going to give. A few years back, we had to have him put down because he just had no will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a moment alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did that night. At this point, I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced none of that would have happened without old Cecil. Thanks, pal. I miss ya. By their conclusion. Long story short, I've been renting this apartment for 4 to 5 months now. I am here on and off. My girlfriend lives abroad, so I stay here a month, then go back to my country for a few weeks, etc. Recently, I tried to move the desk in my apartment as I wanted to make a DIY den for my rabbit, and I wasn't using the desk much. This is when I realized it was plugged to something behind my wardrobe. They're next to each other. There was this black wire, and I followed it to a small compartment under the desk where a camera was very covertly installed and covered in black tape. The camera was basically positioned so that it perfectly records the groin area of someone sitting down on a chair in front of the desk. I guess it could also record the bed, but it didn't have a clear enough direction towards it and could only record maybe 25% of the lower part of the bed. The camera was fully covered in black tape, except for the small objective, so the light on it wouldn't be visible when turned on. The person who put it there had made sure of this by also covering the whole inside of the desk compartment with black tape and cutting a hole through it only for the objective. I can't explain it better, and it would be easier if this sub allowed photos, but the setup was hardly noticeable at all. When I went to the police station, 2 officers drove me to my house and investigated who lived there before me. Apparently, it was an escort who people had filed similar complaints against. Similar from what they said, but they didn't go into much detail. I'm having a hard time figuring out why an escort would use such a setup, and I can't really stop overthinking it. If it was for blackmail, then why place the camera at such a low angle that it couldn't easily capture faces or identifiable features. Why exactly the perfect position to capture someone sitting at the desk? Why a Wi-Fi camera as opposed to a memory card one? The whole building has Wi-Fi, but why would an escort need remote access to a camera even while she's absent? Why positioned it in such a place that you could barely capture the feet/legs of someone laying on the bed and not the whole act? The wire was also taped to the back of my wardrobe with scotch, and it's clear from the setup that this desk has always been in the same place. My apartment is also a very small studio apartment, so not much room to fiddle with the bed's position. We're talking a matter of inches. I have so many questions about this, and I'd really appreciate some insight. A lot of students/kids have lived in this apartment before me, as it's close to a school, and landlady's husband would often unlock the door even if I wasn't home or didn't open when he's knocking, just to showcase it to potential tenants before I had to ask him to stop and tell him that I'm staying here long term. One time he brought this 14-year-old with her mother to show her the apartment. I'm a guy, so I couldn't really care less if he spied on me, as I got nothing to hide, but as I mentioned, kids lived here before me, which is why the officer's conclusion seemed kind of unthoughtful to me, given the possible threat here. And then the OP makes an edit to the post saying, "Here is the video I took before I called the cops. I hope the setup is somewhat clear. This is the compartment in the lower part of the desk, tape wrapped in the interior, and overcam likely to hide the red light coming from when it's plugged in." And then the OP links a video to what he found, and I'll play the video now. Update. Yes, I know, wild. I feel like we never get updates for all of these posts, but the OP posts an update, and let's get into it. The OP says, "I think I forgot to mention this in my last post, but when the cops called the couple about the camera, which the landlady denied even knowing about and said it was definitely not them, they were in a vacation at the beach. Well, they are apparently back, and today, when my girlfriend and I were in front of the building, we saw her husband working in the garage. He went up to us himself and started explaining the situation to my girlfriend in her language. Couldn't understand much, but she translated it to me later. Turns out that now his explanation is that the camera was used by some ex-tenants and that it wasn't plugged in. He said the reason it was still in my room is because he refused to give it back to them because they owed him rent money. He also asked where the camera is now. She told him the cops confiscated it, and he said we shouldn't have called the police. This seems very suspicious by the old landlord. And then he continues saying it kept a $40 camera to break even with the ex-tenants and didn't even bother uninstalling the setup before. Seems suspicious to me, especially since the wife denied even being aware of it when she spoke to the cops. Also, he mentioned nothing about the escort that lived there, which the police told us about. This explanation makes even less sense. And yeah, that is very, very weird. It's also weird that the guy brought himself up to them. I mean, most liars, whenever they're lying or worried about something, they'll kind of tell on themselves, if that makes sense. They're going to be like, oh, I see them. I kind of have to make up something and talk to them. And then they talk themselves into a trap, if that makes sense. But that's very suspicious. Him saying that he took the $40 or the $40 camera as kind of a collateral as rent money, but then it was still installed. That just makes no sense. And him also being like, oh, well, you shouldn't have told the cops or called the cops. The whole situation in that whole conversation was very, very suspicious. And the landlord seems like the perpetrator. Allegedly. My grandpa always taught me to fear rainy days. He would tell me these stories about Redvark, the local maximum security prison. He would tell me about the violent criminals and the deeds they did to end up there. He would explain to me how some of these men were so dangerous that they couldn't be trusted to live in normal jail cells. that they needed to be chained to the stone walls. My grandpa would tell me about rainy days and stormy nights, how the rain would weaken the stone and how these men could pull the chains right out of the wall if the weather was bad enough. He showed me newspaper clippings of escapees. There was always a handful per year. He would tell me that, to a T, the prison breaks always coincided with rainy weather. Most escapees would flee to the surrounding neighborhoods. They would try to hide in people's garages and basements, under their porches, waiting for the rain to pass. Sometimes the men would break into the houses. Sometimes the men would do unspeakable things to people residing in those houses. We lived only about 8 miles from Red Vark, and on those days my grandpa would remind me of this. My grandpa would tell me that on rainy days it was best to just stay in my room, to lock my door, to put some music on low, grab a comic book, and get my head somewhere else. He even taught me how to turn my closet into a fortress of solitude. We threw a blanket and a couple of pillows in there. I had a few posters of superheroes on the closet wall. I kept a box of comic books and baseball cards in one corner, and a metallic footlocker filled with junk food and cassette tapes in the other. My grandpa would encourage me to get in the closet when it rained, especially when it stormed. I would sit in there, listening to my Walkman. I would finger through comic books. I would bundle myself up against the pillows and drift to sleep. I felt safe in my closet, and I enjoyed the hours that I would spend in there on rainy days. He would tell me that most of the time during escapes, the convicts would only usually hurt people they happened to come across. If they broke into a home to avoid police, and there was a family sitting around the TV in the living room, they would strike. He would tell me that if a Red Vark prisoner escaped, and if they came to our neighborhood, and if they broke into our house, that as long as I stayed in my closet, I'd be okay. It would be possible for a convict to find me and hurt me, but as long as I stayed in my closet for it, I'd be safe as anyone in town. I would remind myself on this on rainy days. I would sit in my closet and think about it, and it would make me feel safe. My grandpa disappeared one June. I lived with him alone. My parents had died years earlier. My grandpa disappeared, and I was afraid to call the police. I knew if something happened to my grandpa, the police would take me away and force me to live in a home. I didn't want to live in a home. I had a home. I kept his disappearance to myself for over a week. I would walk myself to school. I knew where Grandpa kept emergency cash, and so I would take a little here and there to the corner bodega and buy some milk and sandwich meats. One day, about 8 days after his disappearance, they let us out of school early. Storm of the century, they said. Thunder and lightning and heavy rain all night. The rain was so heavy that night, the local streets flooded over. On the walk home from school, the water was up to my ankles. By 9 o'clock, the water was coming up to people's knees. I got home, climbed into my little hiding space, and covered myself in a blanket. Thunder clapped outside. I was very afraid. The storm itself unsettled me, but thinking about Red Vark and how easy it would be to escape during a storm like this terrified me. We lost power after a little while. I sat in the closet in darkness. I turned to my Walkman for solace. After a few hours, the music started to stutter. After a few more minutes, it stopped altogether. Batteries, dead as doornails. I continued to sit in silence. The power hadn't come back on yet. The darkness and silence enveloped me. Then the silence was broken by a scratching noise some distance away. I ignored it at first, but it grew louder and more incessant. Finally, I reluctantly left the safety of my fort. In the upstairs hallway, I stopped and listened. The noise was clearly coming from downstairs. I descended the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I got to the kitchen and stopped to listen again. The noise still sounded as if it were coming from below me. We had no basement, so the fact that the noises were coming from beneath me was unsettling. There were more noises now, too, not just scraping. I thought I heard moaning. I crouched low to the floor, listening. The noises grew louder as I entered the living room, louder still as I entered the main corridor. I stopped on a throw rug at the end of the hallway. The noises were at their loudest here, below me. I pulled the throw rug away and saw a trapdoor. It must have led to a basement or a crawl space. I had no idea it existed. I had no idea there was anything under that rug. I wondered why it was padlocked. I grabbed a ring of old keys that hung on a hook in the mudroom. I tried the keys in the padlock one after another. The fourth key slid in the lock like a base runner sliding in two. Something pounded against the bottom of the trapdoor. Thwap, thwap. It was followed by muffled voices. Ulo, every there. I could barely make out their voices. Thwap. Help us. I understood that. I turned the key and lifted up the trapdoor. The worst smell I've ever known wafted up and hit me in the chest. I instantly heard women crying and a man's voice sobbing, "Thank God, oh thank God." And then another, "Water, please, we need water." The next few days were a whirlwind. Police, media, and gawkers descended on the house. Our small town in Arizona never saw much excitement. The news of a homegrown serial killer sent an electric jolt through the populace. The media was relentless. The police had a million questions. Where's your grandfather? I don't know. Did you know what he was doing? Did you help him hide his secret? No, I'd say. No. Never. Did you help your grandfather bury the bodies in the backyard? No. You must have helped, they'd say. No. You must have helped. An old man like that wouldn't be able to dig in the Arizona clay all by himself. And then it hit me. Rain, I'd say. The policeman looked at me blankly. Martin Manley. Every day, there are 1 million people who are celebrating their 60th birthday. Maybe they wake up a little bit later than usual, taking the day off from the job they've held for 40 years. They spend the day relaxing, enjoying time with their family, and thinking about the life they've lived so far. 60 is a milestone, an achievement. In a few years, they'll retire, watch their grandkids grow up, travel the world, learn all of the hobbies they never had time for. It's a reward for their hard work. A life well lived. And there was one ordinary man living in the suburbs of Kansas City, turning 60 on August 15th, 2013, who certainly deserved that. That man was Martin Manley. Martin was born in Topeka, the capital of Kansas, and one of the more interesting cities in an otherwise boring state. Outside of Topeka are small towns where nothing really happens and all you have to look at are cornfields and cows. Unfortunately, this is where Martin moved when he was 12 years old. Previously, he was surrounded by kids his own age. His school down the block, a town where there were things to do. Once moving, Martin says he only had, quote, my brother, my sister, and the sound of moose. But the lack of neighbors wasn't the only thing isolating him. In the 50s, most families were stranded. A mom and a dad, 2 kids, and a house with a tire swing. Martin didn't really have that. His parents were both only children who worked a lot and didn't really know how to make their family a family. They didn't spend a lot of time together, everyone kind of on their own. So with all of this alone time, he learned to entertain himself. He became obsessed with his boyish curiosity, figuring things out, which usually involved math. Martin loved 2 things: numbers and sports. He would spend hours each day creating fake leagues and then coming up with statistics for his imaginary players. At night, he would get lost looking up at the stars. Martin's family had a small TV that only got 2 channels. So with little entertainment there, the sky was his Netflix. Him and his siblings would spend all night on his back porch, hoping to see a shooting star. The next day, Martin would learn astronomy statistics. He was fascinated with how many stars there were up there. This childhood wasn't thrilling, but it shaped Martin into who he'd become. Those years were spent doing exactly what he wanted, for as long as he wanted, because there was nothing else to do, and no one to tell him any differently. He would spend an entire day by himself, focused on the stats of the high school football team, and go to bed satisfied. He knew what he liked, data analysis, and he was independent, self-sufficient, a loner, and he was perfectly okay with that. He took his hard work ethic and created small businesses over the next couple of years. But what he really wanted was a job where he could crunch numbers all day. In 2005, he got his wish. And better yet, he got to do his two favorite things at once: statistics and sports. He was now a sports writer for the Kansas City Star, the local newspaper. But more specifically, he wrote on sports stats. This became his entire life. Not only was he working a 40-hour work week at the Star, but in 2008, he created a blog called Upon Further Review, where he would write more commentary on Kansas City sports. Nothing else mattered to him. He would spend all day in the office working on the paper, and then go home and work on the blog until sometimes 5 a.m. or later. His goal was to make sure readers had an article to wake up to every morning. He did this, with no breaks, for 653 days. Every day, no matter what. This ended in 2012 when Martin abruptly left the paper. Years of working 70 hours a week, living and breathing sports and statistics, had caught up to him. On February 6th, in a state of pure exhaustion, he decided it was time to move on, from the paper at least. He wasn't going to stop writing and analyzing sports. It was the only life he had ever known. He was going to create a new blog, Sports in Review, where he continued writing on an article every day. But he couldn't manage keeping the entire Kansas City sports commentary afloat, so he wrote a letter to the editor at 6 a.m., and that was his last day. But there was more to this decision than just being overworked, because New Year's Day, 2012, Martin realized he may not have a lot of time left. And something had to change before that deadline. After quitting his job, Martin started to use some of that free time to work on another blog. This time, he wasn't writing about sports. He was documenting every aspect of his life, creating a database for all that he's done over 60 years. An analysis of himself. This blog has 34 categories and 44 subcategories, each entry detailed and thorough. He talks about growing up, his marriages, his travels, what kind of food he liked, poems he'd written. He talks about everything. It goes on and on and on. The first half of the blog is different though. It's alarming. One of the first entries is dated January 1st, 2012. Martin explains that since the 1990s, he's had two internet personalities, each alias serving a different purpose. He had Lee Tinman and Al Marley. Lee was used when he wanted to create a real relationship with people he was talking to. Al was when he wanted a presence that was short-lived, when he wanted to be more confrontational, then disappear. Lee is the good guy, and Al is the bad guy, for a lack of better words. He uses these two pseudonyms to create a conversation he's having with himself. This conversation is why he decided to create this blog. It starts off, Len Tinman, why have you decided now to explore this rather than in the past or waiting until sometime in the future? Al Marley, mainly because I haven't had any prevailing reason to do it in the past, as to why not put it off longer. The reason is because the day may come sooner than I would hope when I simply won't be in control of my future. Len, what do you mean you won't be in control of your future? Al, I mean someone else will be in control. I'll be too old to make my own decisions. But that's not the only issue regarding the future. Even if I was in control of pulling a trigger or not, I may have gone beyond my ability to produce a record of my history, proof that I existed. Len, what difference does it make whether there is a record of our history? Al, it makes a big difference to me. Look, I don't have any normal way of leaving a legacy. By that I mean most people have children, lineage. They can live by way of their children's memory as they pass down stories to their own kids. I don't have that. Len, okay, so what do you have in mind for a record of your history? Al, I don't know. I just started thinking about this seriously today. Len, let me see if I have this straight. You want to commit S-word because you don't have any children? Al, that's twisting what I said. First of all, I'm not saying I want to commit S-word, and certainly not today. But I am saying that I want to begin to consider it seriously. And the reason is because if I'm going to leave a record of my life, whether the world cares or not, I'm going to have to be proactive about it. That means I'm going to have to do it while I'm still somewhat lucid, somewhat intelligent. If I wait too long, not only will it be too late to produce it, but it may even be too late to commit the act. Martin wasn't just thinking about leaving the paper. He was thinking about leaving Earth. Leaving for good. But Martin isn't like others. This desire, this urge, isn't out of turmoil. It's not impulsive or reckless. It's almost rational. The way that Martin has been his whole life, looking at things through numbers and logic. Al, the only thing I can say is that nobody alive is more analytical than I am. I know what I can do on a daily basis. I know how many mistakes I make when I type or write or remember or think. I chart everything. I understand trends. I'm making an educated decision that my mind is deteriorating at a rapid rate. I've seen it before with Frank, and I'm not going down that road. Not a chance in a million. Len, I understand that, but what I do not understand is how you can know that this would happen at 60 or 65 or 70 or whenever. Dad was pretty darn sharp at 80. We are a lot like him. Why should we be different? Al, I'm 100% confident that we are different. He didn't drink 2 liters of pop every day for 30 years. Actually, I'm not sure Pop ever swallowed a drop of pop. He didn't have a fraction of the astronomical amount of data shoehorned into his brain that we have had. All I know is that my mind is slipping by the day, and if I don't take the bull by the horns and plan ahead, sometime in the not so distant future, I'm going to wake up one day and I'll no longer be in control, and the idea of leaving a documented record of my life will be a hopeless fantasy. And then is when I'll be depressed, assuming I'm more than a vegetable and even capable of depression. Just as from dust to dust, I'll be going from goo goo gaga to goo goo gaga. They'll probably drag my life out for years and years while I have to live with the realization that I'll be just like every other Tom, Dick, or Harry that lived on this earth that nobody remembers. Len, I'm willing to agree this much. You take a few months and think about this whole thing and I'll do the same, but the odds of you convincing me to, for no other reason, but that you think you won't be able to document it at some point in the near future because we are too far gone mentally. The odds of you convincing me of that are slim. Al, okay, fine. But if I can show you over the, say, next few months or so, clear and indisputable evidence of our serious mental decline, then I'm going to be a lot more aggressive about this than I even am today. All I'm doing now is simply saying that this issue needs to be looked at closely. I've always been one to be prepared, and there's only one chance to be prepared for old age, and that's before it's too late to be prepared. I'm not going to just sit idly by and drift with the winds of time into obscurity. No matter what you think today, that's never going to happen. These two personalities clash. He can't seem to agree with himself, and both sides are fighting for their life. Lee is literally begging to stay alive, but Al is arguing there'll be no living if he keeps going past 60. He will be a shell of a human, and he's desperate to not go through that. And just remember, this is him talking to himself. Martin took the next 6 months to really think about this decision. He thought about his family, his friends, what his death would do to them. He thought about his work, how much he loved it, and how hard it would be to continue in old age. He thought about the future, seeing the world evolve, for better or for worse, whether it was worth it to see what happens. He thought about what others would want him to do, but also what he wanted. His next entry on the blog was on June 11th, 2012. He writes in bold letters, "I am not a conformist. I have worked my whole life to figure out who I am, what makes me special, what makes me unique, and how I fit into society as an individual. Having learned who I am, I've become very comfortable and confident of my place. I don't succumb to peer pressure, and I won't be intimidated. There is zero chance that I'm going to wake up tomorrow or anytime soon and decide that I am no longer motivated to be different or that I am motivated to be the same as everyone else. I not only don't want to be the same as everyone else, I don't want to be the same as anyone else. I'm not going to do what everyone else does just because they do it. In fact, if anyone else does it, then I am likely to want to do the opposite just to be different. Same follows, different leads." He has made his decision. He knows that this isn't what normal people do. Most want to live as long as possible, stretching their time as far as they can. They want to see as much as possible, spend every minute with their family, accomplish a laundry list of medals and recognition, die with no regrets. We try to ignore the inescapable fact that we won't be here forever. We're terrified of death. And Martin knows that not feeling these things is strange, that many won't understand why he's deciding to do this. But he doesn't care. His whole life, he's done everything his way. Martin wasn't just a loner who isolated himself and worked to death. He had many quirks. He ate only one meal a day, at dinner time, sometimes it being the same meal over and over. He rarely slept, once even consistently staying awake for 36 hours and sleeping for 12. He had a collection of fedora hats and would wear one at all times. Many people didn't even know what he looked like without one. All this to say, he was weird. He was different. And that's what his death would be. Bizarre and mysterious. But I can't help but wonder, is there more going on? Is this really a man that's just afraid of ending up in a nursing home? I mean, Martin had no children. He had been divorced twice and his siblings lived far away. Did he feel like he had nothing to live for? But no, Martin makes it very clear that this has nothing to do with the typical reasons someone does this. Despite what you might think or what the conventional wisdom is regarding committing an S-word, none of those reasons apply to me. Number one, I had no health issues. I was only sick 3 times in my adult life that I can remember, and all 3 were self-induced, accidental. I didn't miss a scheduled day of work in over 25 years. I had no diseases. I never drank. I never took drugs. I never smoked. Thus, I had no physical problems other than occasional acid indigestion, but that was after usually eating a whole pan of brownies. So I admit I did have a brownie issue. Number 2, I had no legal issues. I had never been arrested, much less convicted. I'd never seen a jail from the inside. Other than traffic tickets, I was a model citizen, or at least I pretended to be, and nobody could prove otherwise. 3, I had no financial problems. I sold my house, which was completely paid for in 1998. The same year, I bought $30,000 in 10th ounce gold coins and pre-1965 silver coins. Gold was $300 an ounce when I bought it, and silver was $4 an ounce. Gold went up to $1,700 and silver to $44, making my stash worth over $200,000. And I had other assets, including a 401k. Besides, everyone who knows me knew I was extremely cheap. I wanted nothing. Number 4, I had no loss of anyone close to me that I couldn't bear. My mom and dad died at elderly ages, and neither were unexpected. My brother and sister are healthy and active. I never had anyone die who was extremely close to me, other than my parents. Other more distant relatives and secondary friends have died, but nobody close. Number 5, I had plenty of activities in which I participated, including church choir, monthly poker, friends, family, internet, and sports in review. I did not feel lonely or in any way unappreciated for who I was. Number 6, I was not depressed. Anyone who says I was is either ignorant or a liar. I stressed out at times, especially in the workplace, because my tendency was to work myself to death. But I was retired for 18 months before I committed S-word, and I didn't have any stress during that time. And that is just so eerie how he just already says it like it's factual, how he claims his own death 18 months before I committed S-word, and he's obviously still alive writing this. That is so eerie. Let's continue. In some respects, I feel like I was retired for the last 15 years of my life because doing sports statistics could hardly be considered work. In any event, I can't imagine anyone being more stress-free than I am. So, the major reasons adults commit S-word: health, legal, financial, loss of loved ones, loneliness, or depression. None of those issues are relevant to me and, for the most part of my life, have never been. It's not like nothing I've ever heard before. Reading this feels like an argument, honestly. I want to believe him, but after hours of learning everything about this man's life, I don't want him to leave. But Martin doesn't see it that way. Quote, "The apt analogy is that I've run the race. I already got to the finish line. I didn't croak on the way. I didn't get embarrassed. I didn't break a leg. I sprinted most of the time, and sometimes I slowed to a walk to catch my breath, but I could see the finish line, and I liked it. The last thing on earth I was going to do when I got there was keep going. I completed the race because I went over every hurdle that was in my way. Sometimes I fell, but I got back up and ran that much harder. Perhaps your finish line is a little farther off in the distance than mine. I don't know. I only know I reached mine, and when I got there, the only thing I wanted to do was rest. And so I shall." So, on his 60th birthday, Martin crossed that finish line. He organized the day so everything went smoothly and he caused as little damage as he could. At 5 a.m., he went to his local police station and walked over to the far end of the parking lot. He stood under a big tree, the only sound being the leaves blowing in the wind. He says his last thoughts were only about the people he loved and praying for forgiveness. Otherwise, he was just happy his blog was complete, that something was there to remember him. He left a note for the police before he called 911 and reported the act himself. Quote, "I committed S-word of my own free will. I am not under the influence of any drugs. I am sorry for your inconvenience. You'll be contacted within a matter of hours by my sister. She'll find out about this by an overnight letter and or email I sent to her, which she will get this morning. In it, I explained the exact location where I committed S-word and gave her your phone number. At that time, she will tell you who I am. If you discover who I am prior to her call, please do not contact her. I do not want her or anyone else I sent letters to overnight to find out about it from you. I want them to find out about it from me. Thank you. In addition, I recently went through a process of donating an organ. Unfortunately, that process could not be completed by this date. Please contact the following people, especially Manley Kleitz, the first person on the list, so that they may be able to harvest any organs of mine immediately." Then, all by himself, on that late summer head, Martin Manley used a pistol to commit S-word. He was gone, but his writing will live on forever. Some have read through his blog and think that it's tragic. It's clear he was mentally ill or suffering with dementia or just lonely. That this could have been preventable somehow. Others, like author David Lester, have studied Martin and written an entire book on why rational S-word may not be as crazy as we think. I don't know what to believe. Martin's story makes me sad. It's upsetting to think about someone's life ending, but he seemed content with his decision, happy he could go out in the way he wanted. I will end with one final quote from Martin. something that makes me feel unsettled with what happened. Quote, since there wasn't any other logical place to recount my recurring dream on this site, I decided I would do it under this category. For pretty much my entire adult life, I've had a dream every so often that I'm in college and I realize all of a sudden that I haven't been going to class, that I don't even remember all the classes I signed up for or where they were located. The problem is that it's nearing the last few days of the semester. Naturally, I'm walking all over the place trying to figure out courses, days of the week, room numbers, etc. It's a pretty frustrating dream, as you might imagine. Not life or death, but when you were in college, it seems like it. I decided not all that long ago to Google that dream online and see if anyone else has ever experienced it. To my amazement, a lot of people have. In fact, shortly thereafter, I mentioned it to a friend, Scott, and he said he had the same recurring dream. I suspect it is something that is triggered whenever a person is facing a deadline and has some anxiety over it. If that were the case, then I shouldn't have had the dream once since I left the Kansas City Star in February of 2012. However, I've had it a few times since then. Of course, knowing the ultimate deadline was coming up. August 15th, 2013 might have been a trigger for it. Was it the end of a marathon or a deadline? Were these feelings of anxiety only happening in his sleep? He says he was thrilled moments before he committed an S-word, but was there something more under the surface? I can only hope that what he said is true, that this is what he truly wanted, and he's resting easy, watching Kansas City basketball, keeping track of the stats, crunching numbers all day, and writing it all down for everyone to remember. To find my name twin? This is going to sound paranoid, but hear me out. I've been receiving incredibly creepy, disconcerting phone calls at my cell number, calling me by my name but referencing a book I wrote. I'm not an author. I have not written a book. After searching, I found a book published under my same name. My name isn't super weird or anything, but it's unique enough that I found it interesting. The book is set where I grew up and references things that would be known to others in my area in the small towns around us, but not necessarily other people in the world. If you're from a larger state or a metropolitan area, I'm sure this sounds like a reach to you, but I'm from a small, quiet town surrounded by other small, quiet towns in a small, quiet state that everyone forgets exists. The chances of there being two people with the same somewhat unique name living in the same small area and not knowing about each other feels very slim to me. And again, yes, there are others in the country with my first and last name, and one person in the UK, but not nearly as many as, say, someone named Michael Jackson or Matthew Smith. There are over 10,000 people with the name Michael Jackson, but I can only find about 50 public records with my name, and I think some of them are repeats. The weird part is that the author has zero web presence, no social media, no website, no bio, no little author profiles on various book websites. The book has no reviews anywhere on any site. It just exists. If you search the author's name, you pretty much just find me. I was originally trying to contact the author with my name to warn them that someone super creepy is trying to get in touch. But after I found out that they're basically a ghost online, seriously, who doesn't have a footprint online in 2021? I'm starting to become suspicious that someone used my name to publish a book. I don't think it was malicious. My thinking is that someone I knew as a kid wanted to self-publish a book under a pen name and randomly chose mine. If it is just a giant coincidence, I'd love to contact the author to send them the voicemails I've been receiving and give them a heads up. I've contacted the publisher, but they won't give out any of the contact information. I've also contacted the US Copyright Office to inquire, but haven't heard back yet. Do you think there is anything else I can do to find out who wrote and released this book and their email or something? I'm okay with posting the name and ISBN number, etc., but I'm willing to see what y'all think first, because it will personally identify me. Happy to also post recordings of the voicemails if anyone is curious about it. The person sounds like an actual serial killer. Also, I am super weirded out that the caller was able to find my cell phone number. I Googled myself exhaustively today, and I was able to find my parents' landline number, which hasn't been used in years, but I wasn't able to find my own number anywhere. So, what the fuck? How did this creepy person get my number? And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, do you know when the book was first published? How old are you? Also, could you be more specific about the caller references the book? I'm curious what they're trying to accomplish here. And the OP says, the book was published in March 2020. I'm 32. So a little more context. The protagonist in the book is transgender. The caller says your book references the book by name and references the transgender aspect a lot. In the most recent voicemail, she asked if I, myself, am transgender and if that's why I wrote the book. She says it's important that I get in touch with her and call her back because once you give me a call back, trust me, I can really make a big change in your life. Call me. I'll be waiting. The way she is speaking is quiet and hushed and breathy. Her voice itself sounds so creepy, and the messages are relatively long, like a one-sided conversation. That's initially why I wanted to get in contact with the actual author, because the caller just gives me the creeps and I wanted to warn them. If the caller doesn't have ulterior, evil motives, my thinking is that they are a scammer posing as an agent/publishing house. No real updates. I'm still baffled. Here are some minor updates off the top of my head. I did order the book. I'm trying to finish a couple of books on my list and then I'll probably dive in and try to read it. It is super DIY. The formatting of the book is completely off/terrible. It's one of those books where you self-publish and then they print it for each person who orders it. The bio on the back of the book says that she's a lawyer who lives with her partner in my home state. So if she still lives there, why can't I find any evidence of her? There certainly are no attorneys by that name in the entire state. When I posted about this, I had reached out to the book's publisher and was unable to get any info, but they said they'd pass a message in my contact info along. I haven't heard anything from the author. I contacted a UK-based author with my same name who confirmed that this other book was not written by her, so the phone messages are not intended for her. I guess that wouldn't make sense since she lives in the UK anyway. I also found an email for the only person with my same name who has lived in my state within the last 40-ish years, so I emailed and she has not responded. I haven't received any other phone calls, but as soon as I do, I'll post it here. I kind of want to post the recording so y'all can hear them. They are super creepy. Oh, also, I was unable to locate the book title, author, or ISBN in any sort of copyright database, so I contacted the US Copyright Office and they said it would be like $200 per hour to get them to search for. I sold drugs at university to get by and ruined my life. Before I started university, the main thing highlighted by my parents and everyone else was the financial side. The loan I was granted for university wasn't going to be anywhere near enough to cover my expenses and my rent, but I lied to my parents to keep them from stressing that I'd get a job and sort it out myself. I tried finding a job online over the summer before moving to uni in a city an hour away, but 4 months and no luck. I then went to a festival at the end of the summer and took my friend's advice on selling a little bit of Zaza and a few other things to people in there to start a little saving to take with me. All I was worried about was having to rely on my parents when they already supported my sister and are going through a very tough time financially. I made quite a bit, and this made me think I should do it more to other students to help me get by, as a lot of people I knew did it and paid off a lot while in uni. So I moved away, started selling, and life was good. I always made sure people were safe. No one ever had any issues at all, so I was good. My first year at university was a success, and I was able to help my parents out too with some money and not having to ask them for anything. As the eldest son, it's my job to provide, not take, and I didn't care how I was doing it. I wasn't hurting anyone, and it wasn't bothering anyone. The second year went well. I made enough to help my friend who was also struggling, and was able to do a lot more for my family with my life than I was ever able to do before, and I was happy. The summer came around and I was sick of it now. I hated always looking over my shoulder. That was the only thing that got to me. I knew I wasn't harming anyone or causing an issue, so I saw no problem besides the stress and the anxiety it gave me, so I decided to quit after one last time. Over the course of the last 2 years, I had made a lot of friends and connections through selling, but not about drugs, but more towards creative ideas and other people like myself, which in the end helped me realize what I wanted to do in my life, and this summer was going to be the end of this, and I was finally going to get my shit together and do what I felt was right. So I went to this festival. I'm enjoying myself, and on the second day, I was caught by security through someone snitching on me. I was arrested at the festival, totally strip searched, and then taken to a custody center an hour away with no phone, money, or ID, as they took it all away from me and kept it as evidence. After spending 28 hours in a cell with nothing but one tuna sandwich given to me, I was then given a solicitor and interviewed. From that moment, I knew my life was over. I was interviewed and made clear of what was going to happen, and I had lost everything from this when I was so close to leaving it all behind. I'm currently under investigation and free without bail, but I've been told I'm looking at 6 to 8 years, all for this stupid mistake I should have never done. I was caught with an ounce of booger sugar, an ounce of Zaza, 150 pills, an ounce of K, and 1 ounce of another substance, all bagged up to sell with a cash amount of just shy of $3,000 and my phone with evidence. I'm not proud of any of this. I just say it all to give you an idea of what I had. Since then, my life has been ruined. Unable to go back to university because I have no idea when I'll be called to court, so my life is in literal limbo. My friends are hurt, but it's shown me who my real friends are, especially in a time of need, but most of all, my family are hurt more than anything. No one besides my mom, dad, and sister and my family know, and we intend to keep it a secret from the rest of our family, as we don't want to hurt them too, and this kills me. Knowing I'll be gone for so long and my family will change their opinion on me from the eldest son and pride of the whole family to a failure drug dealer who's ruined his life. I would do or give anything to go back to the beginning of this year and change all of this, to sort my life out early and avoid any of this. Sadly, it's not that easy, and now I have to do my time for my mistakes. I just wish it could all be so different. I hope if you're reading this, it changes your mind from doing any of this. I thought I was never going to get caught, but one way or another, it takes 1 second for your whole life to be turned upside down. Who could... OP's mom goes to Mexico to meet her long-distance boyfriend and goes missing. Please, I really need help. I haven't heard of my mom in 14 hours and she's by herself in Mexico. Something is very, very wrong. Hi everyone. I have never posted on a subreddit before, so I'm unsure how to start, but I really need help on how to proceed right now. I will attempt to be straight to the point. My mom went to Mexico City exactly 8 days ago to meet up with this guy she's been chatting with online for roughly 3 months. I couldn't go because my passport process wasn't complete, and she couldn't hold on for a few weeks, so she decided to go by herself. I had her location tracked and told her to be sure to ask for Wi-Fi whenever she went. I urged her to be careful as hell. She left the hotel she was staying in by herself in Mexico City last Tuesday and went to Veracruz with this guy to stay in a different hotel together. She FaceTimed me daily and 85% of the time had connection because of Wi-Fi or local coverage. Fast forward to last night. She's back near Mexico City in a place called Tiziuca and says she's going to eat with him and other people she just met basically. 2 hours later, she FaceTimes me and she's flat out drunk and shows me something weird on the floor that I could not make out, and they're yelling back and forth at each other. She claims that they don't want her to talk to me and only focus on me, and she begs me to push the flight up from Sunday to tomorrow, so I did that. He insults her repeatedly and then insults me on the phone, and then she insults him back. He keeps pushing her and cornering her, and launches a punch/hit at her face and grabs her phone, and it goes flying across the room. The two other people are simply sitting at the table and laughing it off, and she grabs her phone and exits the house, but I'm telling her not to or the connection will be lost. She doesn't hear me, and she's yelling in the street asking for someone to call the police in Spanish. I'm just sitting on the call trying to figure out what the fuck is happening, and I tell her to calm down, but she's not paying attention to me. The call drops and I haven't heard of her since. None of my messages have been delivering since 1 a.m. yesterday morning. If she went back in the house, surely the Wi-Fi would have reconnected and they would have delivered. They haven't, and I am incredibly worried. Her location has also dropped off the map, and Google location claims she was last seen over 36 hours ago. Find My iPhone won't play a sound unless there's connection, and there hasn't been for also 36 plus hours. I've tried a million times to reach her. Nope. I told my mom that in case anything happens, she can repeatedly press the side button for an emergency call, but that didn't go through her mind. The behavior in that house was extremely off based on the call. The energy just didn't feel right from the start. I called 911 right after the call dropped, and they connected me with another place, where they connected me with another place. Sadly, I don't have the address or even a street name to provide because this was a grid neighborhood in a rundown part miles outside of Mexico City in a town called Tizayuca. I contacted 911 again, but dead end. I keep reaching higher levels of assistance now. I know the guy's name, number, Facebook, and have a photo of his ID for safety reasons, so I know who exactly he is, but there's no address on the ID. My mom doesn't know when the flight leaves for Tuesday. She only asked me to reschedule it ASAP. I did, but she won't be able to see any Delta notifications since her phone has been unreachable for a while now. She has no idea when the new flight is set to leave. I postponed it for Thursday now in case she's found within the next day. My question is, what now? I'm a 19-year-old guy in New York, by the way. I've never been to Mexico and wouldn't know how anything works. My Spanish is generally shitty, speaking-wise, but I understand it perfectly. There's too many scenarios that are racing through my head. Please, if someone can give me advice on what to do next. And then the OP gives us an update, saying, I did contact the embassy and they were very, very helpful. Asked me for a lot of info, and they got a hold of the police near the town she was in after a few hours. They called me just now and claim that my mom and that guy left the house a few minutes after everything happened, and he, quote, drove her to the airport. The police and others on the four-way call questioned this because they were all drinking. They told me they'll contact back in 15 minutes because they want to confirm the plates to the car or something. I'm happy the woman who spoke with the officer said some small tip, but it adds more questions in my head because that's them alone in one car. And then the OP makes a second update saying, the team of 2 people and the officer on the phone who've been helping me most of the way told me they have the car's plate numbers because of a CCTV screenshot and put a tab on it so they can be on the lookout for it. They also are contacting all the nearby hotels in Mexico City and are looking for either her or his name at check-ins, I believe. But he explained to me it's now a waiting game and have to hope that news shows up at this point. The lucky thing is they have plate numbers, but it wasn't a cab, and her phone hasn't synced for almost a day. Surely she'd have a Wi-Fi and a charger with her if she had arrived at a hotel already. Update 3. I just checked with Delta on the phone even after checking online and seeing that she hasn't checked in for her flight due in a few hours. I probably have to push the flight further down in another day or two because Delta didn't help me much. Also, I did find this guy's Facebook, which seems kind of sketchy. His number was on it, so I got his WhatsApp and noticed he was online much recently. I forwarded all of this and the picture of his ID I asked my mom to send me earlier in the day to the man helping me from the embassy. It's mostly a waiting game now. No signs showing my mom's phone as turned on or had service since the call dropped last night. I have to sleep and I have work, but now I don't know if I should go in case I miss any call. Update 4. 36 hours later. Long story short, I filled out a missing persons questionnaire for review and I got the license plate number, make and model, etc. I think I'm doing a good thing right now. My mom's coworker took me to my local precinct, but that was a very big dead end. They are considering I should hire a PI for this now, but the man who's been in touch with me hourly from the Mexican embassy is telling me they're looking and will get in touch with me on an update by midday. Right now, it's 11:30 a.m. I hate to say it, but there's no positive updates right now. The hole is deepening and no signs of any activity on Find My iPhone. Gmail tracking. Cannot play an emergency noise because the phone isn't connected to internet and no calls go through. I really hope the day ends with some positivity because right now I've almost exhausted most of my abilities to move forward. And oh my God, I can't even imagine how he feels right now. I mean, I would be beyond terrified. And the OP is exhausting all of his efforts, contacting the embassy, contacting the police, etc., and they can't give him any answers. God, I would be a wreck. I mean, this is like a nightmare situation. But then the OP provides a 5th update. Let's get into it. Guys, my mom is okay. Good news, but also basic news. She FaceTimed me and said she had no service, etc., etc. The embassy personnel were in the house as well as the officers checking once again and found her in the same spot she was in 2 days ago. They interviewed her privately and pressured her to spill whatever truth there was, but she stuck with the idea that it was a drunk fight and a misunderstanding, but I'm not happy one bit. They questioned why does she have connection now, but she didn't yesterday, and she couldn't even respond to that. I'm honestly so exhausted with her, and even her coworker and I spoke about the fact that she needs to grow up because she still insists on her flight departing on Sunday. I'm not sure how to feel with her staying over there for the original 5 extra days, and if I have now canceled my report and something does happen within the next 5 days, it's going to look like I'm just a crying wolf. This was exhausting, and I don't think she understands the amount of stress she put people in, but she insisted she's fine. She told me she's fine. I keep trying to convince her, and even made up an excuse that I can't switch the fight anymore, or I'll have to pay out-of-pocket money, and it's like she doesn't seem to care. She told me she wants to come home and just forget everything ever happened, as well as this guy, and I'm not convinced that's going to be the case, and it annoys me because I know what I saw. I'm just happy she's okay, I guess. Everything seems to be okay. Officers took a photo of her for verification, even made her show her body to make sure there's no bruising, etc., and I even had to speak to them in Spanish, which somehow my Spanish sounded fluent for once. By the way, my mom is Mexican, so she communicated with them perfectly, but she doesn't know any direct family there since she's been in the US for the past 20 plus years. Final few notes. I just want to say thank you for everyone investing so much time and help into this. I used Reddit as a last resort after a few hours, and it ended up giving me multiple ideas that turned out to be so useful. Sorry for worrying everyone here, but I'm not happy with the results as a whole that much, and just want her to come home because the fact that she wants to stay an extra few days isn't sitting right with me. Trust me. Her being alive and clearly safe/comfortable makes me feel relieved, but I don't know what to think. I appreciate each and every one of you, and sorry for not answering messages because I was busy most of the day. I was about to start making a whole GoFundMe for a PI, but it won't be necessary now because I'm genuinely so warmed by everyone going out of their way to check themselves and even offer help. Update 6. She's coming home tomorrow, Thursday instead of Sunday now. I think she woke up this morning with some brain cell growth, so thank God I didn't make any flight changes. Update 7. She's home. And we're all good now because we talked it out and she's sorry and explained to other people I told her, and they told her not to do that and leave someone hanging, etc. But she's home, so thank you everyone. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, I have the feeling something happened to the mom during those hours of no contact, and she was probably in shock when she first contacted her son. The comment about wanting to forget what happened makes me think some pretty bad shit went down. Really though, this woman is extremely fortunate her son sounded the alarm, because otherwise, with no one to miss her or notice her disappearance, she could have easily ended up dead. And someone replies to that saying, I am sadly sliding this way too. I am Mexican, and I wouldn't go by myself to this town in the middle of nowhere. Hell, last time we visited, I didn't let my husband go to the store alone in some of the towns we visited, 1 block away. Crimes against women are higher in small towns, and the police are usually unhelpful. I was honestly expecting the worst out of this story. And then someone else replies saying, absolutely. I think that her sticking to the drunk fight story is because she was threatened into it, or they would hurt her son. The fact that he was up and down for 5 days and he didn't contact him till after it is super sketchy. Edit. Also, the fact that she doesn't care about the cost, she just wants to go home, says something. And then someone else comments saying, I would bet hard cash that she got herself mixed up in the drug trade somehow. Another user comments saying she was probably drugged and very nearly trafficked, but they dumped her when embassy and cops came sniffing around. Another person says, gosh, I felt like I was watching Dateline reading this. I was fully expecting the update to be that she was never found. What a shitty mom putting her son through this. Another commenter says, I was horrified reading this. I'm glad the mother is back in the US. I'm convinced something horrible happened to her. And I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, such a horrifying situation. I mean, just up until that final update, I was just waiting for the OP to say, they can't find my mom. I was waiting for that horrible and sad update where he couldn't find his mom, or his mom was found in a horrific condition or something like that. But thank God she's safe and home. That's great. But what do you think happened during those few days of no contact? Because she said she was fine, but why would she not reach out to her son, who is frantically looking for her? I find it very, very odd, and I guess you can subscribe to any of the theories in the comments that these people had. But what do you guys think? I'm very curious as to what you guys think that the user or the mom was caught up in, and why she wouldn't want to contact her son. But luckily, the mom has such a great son, the OP, who wanted to help her out and acted quick and acted fast. And luckily, the embassy and the cops found her before who knows what happened. Such a scary situation, though, and this was the best case scenario. So this happened when I was about 4 years old. It's the most vivid memory of my childhood that I have. A bit of important context: my mother, older brother, and I all lived with my grandma for a good part of our childhood. Not moving out until I was around 7 or 8, and was one of my favorite places to be in my grandma's house was out in the garage. That's where we had our washer and dryer, and I can't explain it, but I just enjoyed being out there. Anyways, when I was about 4 years old, I would spend my time chatting out there with a little boy named Charlie. He was around my age with blonde hair, gray eyes, and wore one of those sailor costumes you'd see in Halloween stores. We would talk for hours about all kinds of things. I'd tell my mother about him, and she'd just chalk it up to Charlie being my imaginary friend. But he wasn't. In fact, at that age, I already had an imaginary friend. Her name was Arlette. I even kept insisting that Charlie wasn't imaginary, that he was real, but every time I tried to show my mom, Charlie would never show up. Over the years, he eventually faded into nothingness, and I never saw him again. But as I grew older, I started to believe that Charlie was a ghost of some sorts, and that maybe having my companionship helped ease his soul so he could pass over to the next plane of existence. Not a scary paranormal encounter, but it was mine, and I felt like you'd enjoy it as well. Take care, Snook, and stay safe. You're awesome.